In this video, I'd like to talk about assessments. Let me start with this situation. Suppose you teach ESP to students in the chemistry department, and one day you gave them a test. Johnny, one of your students, just took his first exam in his class. He earned 56%, thus he needs 79% to pass the class. Then the question is, what do you understand about Johnny's learning outcome? From this case, we learn the low exam score lets Johnny know that he missed something important he should have learned. Perhaps he did not understand the material, or maybe he did not study long enough. Whatever the case, the assessment results let Johnny know that he did not successfully learn the material and that he must try something new in order to earn a better score. Just as assessment helps students, assessment also helps teachers. Frequent assessment allows teachers to see if their teaching has been effective. Assessment also allows teachers to ensure students learn what they need to know in order to meet the course's learning objectives. Now let me give you another example. After finishing the unit on cell division, because you are teaching to the students learning biology, you give them a test, multiple choice test. Upon grading the exam, you realize the average class grade was 68%, and that means far below the cut-off line for passing. You can easily see that your students didn't fully learn the topic quite well. And this fact tells you that you need to revisit the topic again, determine why your students failed the exam. Perhaps you may need to try a different teaching strategy, or perhaps you did not spend enough time on difficult material. Assessment and feedback are essential to students' learning. Assessment for learning focuses on the opportunities to develop students' abilities to evaluate themselves, to make judgment about their own performance and improve upon it. Assessment for learning can be done in various ways in the classroom. We, as teachers, can start the class by asking about what our students remember about the lessons last week. We can also ask questions, making sure they have learned, they have understood the topics we have been teaching to them. As a matter of fact, students may have a real passion for their subject. Ideally, the methods of assessment we use should do more than award a grade. They need to serve as an aid to students' learning, allow them to coach their progress, get feedback on their strengths and weaknesses. And this fit with the concept of assessment for learning. In short, all forms of methods teachers use to obtain information about the process or progress of learning from the students are the representations of assessment for learning. Deciding what it is you want to assess may sound like an obvious first step, but in fact, it can be tricky because you have to pay attention to some important principles, some important guidance. Good assessment will have the following elements. And now let me start with so-called validity. So validity requires us to assess particular skills or competence reflecting the learning outcomes or the learning objectives of the course study we are teaching. The question is how to ensure the validity of our assessment. For example, the learning objectives of our class is that after attending the ESP class, students in the accounting class can create an email replying to a request of a client regarding financial audit. So based on this goal, a good teacher will make an assessment. For example, like asking your students to create an email. To facilitate assessment, like requesting them to create an email. So this is very relevant and it fits the teaching objectives. You promote students' capability of making an email, and your assessment is in line or is aligned to the teaching objective. Okay, the next principle is called reliability. So this principle requires you to create and clearly define criteria that are aligned with the learning outcomes of the course of a study, making the assessment process objective and accurate. For example, regardless of time and place, if you want to have your assessment reliable, so you will always be consistent to give the same score to particular work your students have prepared. The question is then how to ensure reliability or consistency with the assessments you have before. For example, in the ESP, you are teaching accounting class. Just I said before, your teaching objective is to be able to create or to prepare an email. Then you have a rubric. So rubrics ensure consistency. Rubrics tell you what to grade, which aspect you have to pay attention to when you are grading, assessing your students' email. So with this rubric, you become more consistent than without having any rubrics. On the other hand, because your students know you are using rubrics and you let them know what and how your rubrics look like, when they got the result of your assessment, they can accept that because you guarantee the clarity of your grading, of your scoring based on the rubrics you have prepared. Okay, next principle I'd like to call authenticity. So authenticity requires you to take into account knowledge, skills that are relevant in the workplace and that are valued by people who work. Authentic assessment is the idea of using creative learning experience to test student skills, knowledge in realistic situations. So, authentic assessment measures our students' success in a way that is relevant to the skill required of them when they finished the program or the teaching lesson. Well, unlike traditional assessments such as multiple choice exam, authentic assessment asks the student to engage in the scenarios or practices, just like creating an email. So creating an email is sort of the assessment which is more authentic than having a multiple choice test. So, everyone, in conclusion, before I finish this short presentation, we have learned some important aspects, and I've talked about assessment. And in this case, we have to pay attention to that assessment in an ESP course performs some rules. For example, to measure progress, in this case providing the basis for decision on whether our student is ready to proceed. Moreover, teachers can also gain benefit from the assessment to improve their teaching quality. And again, to develop assessment, make sure we have to pay attention to the principles of validity, reliability, and authenticity. I think that's it. Hopefully you find the short video useful. Thank you very much for watching.